Washington's not exempt. We do have wildfires in some areas of our state, and North Idaho as well. So, I mean, in those areas, it is still a very big valid concerns. I know Medical Lakes over in Spokane had many houses burned down last year. So, I mean, this is a valid concern that people are having, but it prompts us all to take a look at insurance closely because when people are buying homes, they want to make sure the insurance in case something happens, flood, earthquake, wildfire, things like that. We're seeing a rise too in insurance claims because there were so many waivers as well. So during the 2020, 2021, 2022, a part of that as well, there's so many people waiving inspection contingencies that there are a lot of deferred maintenances now being cropped up and being brought up on insurance claims by the new homeowners, which is now impacting the next slew of homeowners too. So it's on the docket. It's something we can't deny. That's why we're getting so many questions about homeowners insurance right now.
Okay. Go to the next slide. So, how do these pop up, I guess would be the question. And sometimes we're trying to get ahead of things and be more proactive as a real estate agent, but there's insurance claims that get posted. So when, let's say something happened to my house, knock on wood, I mean, I hope I don't jinx myself here, Shannon, but every dishwasher I think I've owned has had, like, I've had a leak and it's gone on my wood floors, and then I have to file an insurance claim. So anytime that something like that happens and you have insurance that will, it'll be a claim, it gets recorded. So it's not like you can avoid it. So there's going to be, this one on the screen here was actually a buyer that was buying a home, and he went to Progressive to get, to see what, to get his insurance binder set up. Luckily we had him do that at the beginning, right, Shannon? We had him jump in there and get that
Yeah.
process started. He was a new buyer, so we were definitely going through the hoops, jumping him through, making sure that he got his binder started, not waiting till the very end. That's a best practice or a tip. But he went to Progressive because that's who he gets his car insurance through. And they pulled up this sheet that we have here on the screen that talked about the occurrence. There was an occurrence in May and December in 2023. This is probably a home that they bought, and then they had an insurance claim. And when we really dug into it, that's exactly what happened. Just like Shannon alluded to, 2020, 2021, home was purchased and they didn't do an inspection, and then they had a water leak. It says WATR, it says peril, water, freeze. APPL, that stands for appliances. So I'm like, dang, they had upwards. How much was the claim on this one?
It's over $50,000 that they had total that was paid out by insurance, and it stays with the property. I mean, insurance, they're not dummies. They're seeing the history on this. There's been claims on this, and so when they see claims, they think, oh, there's risk here. We want to obviously make sure that the insurance company charges more in order to make it make sense.
Hey, Rochelle,
Yeah,
do
Sean.
you think so? As far as the insurance claims stay with the property, as a listing agent, maybe it's a good thing for you to ask your owners, have you had claims in the last 5 years? If they have, they really should get some kind of preempted insurance to see what this buyer is going to deal with, because not only will it affect them being insured, but their debt ratio will be off the hook
Yeah.
with
Yeah, we'll
increase.
we'll get to that here in a second. So, this particular
That's
circumstance, the buyer did their due diligence, and this would be kind of, I guess, learned from this really good, savvy little buyer, first-time home buyer who got his insurance binder before the inspection contingency was up. And we were able to get a 22 VV, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, because this home was in Washington, and incorporate that as part of the negotiations. But what's interesting is seeing what the seller had to say. As discussed on the phone, there was a pipe leak in the kitchen. The previous owners had particle board under the tile. It cracked. They have home site insurance through Progressive. I mean, it caused a delay.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And here's the silly part, Shan, is that it should have been disclosed on the seller's disclosure,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like, wow. So as good real estate buyers agents that we were, right? What did we do? We rolled up our sleeves and we went to town and negotiate this for our
Yeah.
client. So let's go to the next slide. Let's kind of show them what we did. This is another example. This is another one we just had recently. You guys have seen this house. We put this on the screen a couple months ago. We actually closed it, but you know what? We got through inspection, we got through appraisal, we got through all of the contingencies. And guess what held this thing up and caused a delay? It was that roof
Insurance.
needed to be cleaned before the insurance binder would be written.
Yeah,
And we
it
had
went
to
through, I
shop
think,
that.
3 or 4 different insurance brokers just in order to basically take a look at it and determine the risk factors on it. But it came down to us actually having the clay tile roof cleaned. And that's something that had we known ahead of time, I mean, it would have been a lot faster and smoother for that buyer.
Go to the next slide. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind. So coming from the lender, having a solutions mindset. So Sean's on it. I mean, that was great, Sean. What could we have done on both those cases to get ahead of things and kind of preemptively do some things for our client? So most important, we had, this is from a lender. This last couple months have been a whirlwind. Most importantly, we have had 3 contracts who have been close calls because of insurance premiums on old homes. That's the key word. So if you've got an older home, you might want to take a closer look at this. One of the client's premiums was $3,200 on a single family home, $4,800 on a triplex, and then it affected the DTI. So Sean's not wrong. So you got to kind of really weigh the factors of, should I submit the claim or maybe I don't, because it might impact my the ability to get a mortgage. So make sure your lenders are taking this into account and you're bringing this to attention if you need to make it make sense for the deal to stick together. And then I would say our good friends over in Spokane, I would say Eastern Washington, they are already doing 22 VV. Every single contract that I review over in Spokane, they're using a 22 VV. So what I understand from them when I've gone to classes over there in Spokane is that they've had issues way back, I think about 7, 8 years ago, and where the flood insurance became kind of a big deal and the fire insurance. And so they started including the 22 VV a long, long time ago into their mix of required addenda. So it's very rare that I'll find a purchase and sale agreement over in Eastern Washington that does not include the 22 VV. I'm going to give you guys a little secret too. This is probably one of the only 2 or 3 documents that's going to be getting an overhaul. They're going to be revising this in the next couple months. It says 22 VV. So I wouldn't get too, all excited about the language, but accept that you probably want to start incorporating it more into your negotiations, because what this does is puts everybody on notice that the buyer is going to get homeowners insurance and that the agreement is conditioned on the buyer reviewing the standard policy of homeowners insurance, and that it's going to be timely given and that it can't deviate very much more. And so in certain circumstances where you come to me, and even in my, at the example I shared at the beginning of this call, this homeowners insurance contingency, I had to negotiate that during the inspection contingency because we found out new information about nobody could insure the place because of the $50,000 claim that they had taken out and not disclosed to us. So during the inspection negotiation, I asked them to fix X, Y, and Z. And then on top of that, I said that the buyer would stay with the deal as long as we could get an insurance binder and we could review that insurance binder and it would work for my client. So this was an example, including the negotiations. If you maybe have failed, maybe you have a deal under contract right now and you're like, ooh, I'm kind of getting nervous about that. This was a Form 35R inspection negotiation where I basically added that contingency into the purchase and sale agreement, and that the seller would provide the receipts for the work performed, that they would be full disclosure, provide all of those receipts for that $50,000 worth of work that they did to the property. That was important for my client to move forward. So if you haven't used a 22 VV, you might want to consider using it. Or if you're in Idaho, you may want to consider adding some language in to allow for you to review the contingency or have a contingency for the insurance provision. And then certainly in Western Washington, we've got to do a better job of including that into our mix. I think we're
Yeah,
already
I think over in Western Washington, we have probably more claims to deal with, kind of like the situation we described, where it's like there's leaks and things like that. But more importantly, it's kind of flood insurance too. If we've got homes, those are the ones that are really devastating in many cases. But it's like if you've got a home on a flood zone, And this is a good example here on the screen that you can see. This is a house in Renton. This is on a flood zone. So it's going to increase the premiums for insurance on this. Now, is that going to impact your buyer? I mean, this is where we need to get ahead of it in many cases.
You've got the purple. See, what's interesting too, this is all in the valley, and the way the river runs, some of it is in the 100-year floodway, and then that other part, that kind of that yellowish green color, it's protected area of the levee. So you're gonna have a different insurance rate, is what Shannon's saying. So you need to understand and do your research, at least so you know, so you can properly price properties and you can properly give your clients advice on what they should do as far as the pricing and disclosure, making sure that you know about these types of things. It doesn't impact the value. Because we've had properties listings, Shannon, that you and I have listed in that AO area and that X500 area.
Oh yeah.
It's a big difference.
Oh yeah. It's enough to make buyers hit the pause button to consider a home, well, basically to not consider a home because it's in that flood zone area. So this particular screenshot's from Northwest MLS. I know we got people from all over the state here, and we're very spoiled in Northwest MLS. I'm not sure if OLS, RMLS, and Spokane are the same way, but it's one button click to pull up the flood maps, and it's certainly an underutilized tool for sure. I showed this with an insurance person one time, and he goes, "You can find that in one button click." He's like, "We have to hunt through stuff just to find it, and to have it visual like this." He's like, "Wow, that's incredible." So something to take a look at if it takes one click just to see whether or not you're in a flood zone.
Title insurance, title company has this information too. If you need to drill down deep, people have asked me like, where do I get this? It's also, you have to hunt for it on the web, or title insurance company, or if you're in an MLS, there is some different map overlays you can use. Let's go to the next slide. So items of value that you can give your clients. Shannon, we were kind of thinking about what you can do, how you can message.
Yeah, I think the key is like if you're looking to get a message out to your clients right now, it's certainly on everybody's minds. I mean, we're all hearing about the national stuff going down in California, but how does that impact me? Even though we're in Washington, and maybe in certain areas you may not be subject to wildfires, you kind of still are impacted by what's going on. So if you're looking for something to send out to your sphere of influence, your VIP clients, I mean, provide some sort of item of value so that you can be their real estate advisor for life, right? And so something that you could certainly do, incorporate in your process is send a reminder to them. Hey, it's that time of year, you might want to take a look at your policy, shop your rates, make sure that you have adequate coverage. This is what's going on in your area. You may want to consider this. I mean, that's something that you could do to get your name in front of them. So a lot of people reach out to us asking, I don't know what to say in an email or say on the phone. Well, here's something that you guys can share. Get the word out.
Yeah, so the recommendation would be right there. Shannon's already typed it up for you if you want to take a quick picture of it or just shot it if you're listening to this recording afterwards. But I think, Candace, we talked about that in January. We had an insurance broker that is very well known, and she's like, gave me some tips, and I had my husband, it's been years since I looked at my insurance. Definitely didn't do twice a year, Shannon. So if somebody called me and said, hey, take a look, at your insurance binder, make sure that your name is correct on the top, that it matches, because we don't want them denying if something was to happen. If like I have earthquake insurance on my house, and because I did not have my name correct, I changed it into a trust, then there's a chance they might deny it. Right. So you need to make sure that you are reviewing your policy more. I'm kind of like set it and forget it if it's not real estate related, but it is real estate related, right? You want to make sure you're taking a look at that. So basically send a message to your VIP clients, let them know that you've got some good people. We ended up saving at least 2 or 3 deals, Shannon, just in the last 30 days by getting our insurance broker to just take a look at something or knowing where to go. So if you need to, we've got resources here for your help.
Yeah, and this, if for those that are licensed in Washington, which I think is a vast majority of those with Best Choice, I mean, this is the stuff that we're seeing here in Washington State. So spread the good word. I'd say this is the good word right now, is that starting July 1st of this year, Washington's implementing new law requiring insurance providers to give homeowners at least 60 days of notice before dropping coverage. which is an increase from the 45-day requirement. So this is something that is good for us, that kind of is going on with what's going on down in California. This is what Washington has done to be very proactive on this, so people do not lose coverage. There is a bunch of Senate bills and things like that going on right now to understand how the underwriting is affecting things. So we're going to keep an eye on this. And I'm sure the Northwest MLS is keeping an eye on this when they're doing their forms revisions. But there's more to come when it comes to the insurance.
And we probably should have an insurance guy or girl or person jump on and help us out.
Yeah.
But we definitely want to just cue you guys up for just what to keep an eye out for, you know, as you're moving through this year.
And Michelle, also, when you have insurance agents, you need to make sure they also know people who can insure other properties. Like I have Allstate, and sometimes Allstate won't insure State Farm or whatever. And when you
Right.
do the 1-800 number, they're not going to give you that customized service like a real estate agent does. So
Yeah.
having those connections are important.
And local, you know, so
Yeah.
they can know how to get things done and through all of the red tape. No, it's good. Some best practices. We talked about this, Shannon, a little bit. You know, you were saying we kind of were bouncing ideas like, what are you telling the agents? What am I telling the agents? Are we saying the same messaging? And by and far, these are like our top, I would say 5 or 6 things that came to mind. But I want you to think if there's some other best practices that you could share with the team today. After we get done going through our 5 or 6, we'll open up the call. We've got about 5-10 minutes that we can kind of go through what we've come up with as best practices. Do you want to start with your couple?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about flood zones. So looking up the flood zones ahead of time, especially if you're representing a buyer, you know, you're going to look very good if you kind of get them up to speed on what that means for them. I think start using an insurance contingency when you're representing a buyer. Especially if in some of those high risk areas, we've got some agents over on the other side of the mountains. That it especially is going to be important if you're on a hill, you're on a river. I mean, let's put 2 and 2 together. You might want to make sure the insurance is going to check out. Contact an insurance broker you trust before the inspection timelines ends. It doesn't mean you need the binder necessarily, but you might want to have someone take a look at the file or look at the house, pull up the Zillow, you know, so that they can kind of see what it looks like. That house that we showed on the screen with the roof, we could have gotten ahead of that, and that insurance person just had it, you know, took a peek at it before we put it on the market. Could have saved us a lot of hassle down the road. Cash seller financing. We're helping the insurance. I think this one's yours, Rochelle. You were dealing
Yeah,
with a
no,
situation
I'll talk about
recently.
this one. I mean, some people
Yeah.
said, they called me, I think it was over the weekend, they said, Rochelle, I'm representing a cash buyer. Is it my responsibility to help that buyer get homeowners insurance? And I'm like, it's kind of everybody's responsibility. I mean, we really should be helping and cultivating that they should have protection. It shouldn't be a situation where this really did happen, a buyer's agent that was with Best Choice Realty, the buyer ended up buying a manufactured home cash in a park, and the whole manufactured home burnt down. And there was homeowners insurance for that, but the buyer chose not to get it. And we actually legally, we had to respond to a claim. And unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, we advised and we asked them, you know, we should get an insurance, but the buyer chose not to. And that was kind of a sad story, but one where, is it your responsibility? Not necessarily, but it kind of is a customer service aspect where you want to make sure that they know that even if they're paying cash or if they're seller financing, you really should advise that they have a homeowner's insurance policy on the place. I never want to have you guys sell something and then have something burn down or flooded.
I
Oh
would
my God.
not want to live with that.
No, I
Devastating.
wouldn't want to live
Yeah.
with that. And so, yeah, is it your responsibility? I would say, as if you're a Best Choice Realty agent, you probably should give them a couple names or advise in writing in an email that, hey, let's get your insurance binder ordered, because that saved one of our agents a lot of money and a lot of hassle by doing that.
I do think just having a trusted insurance broker is another. It's an under-leveraged vendor in our industry. So having someone that you can rely on, you can trust, having to at least 2 names, just like an inspector. And most of us have at least 2 or 3 inspectors to refer to a client. We should kind of get in the same habit of referring insurance brokers too. So
I
that
think
way
so
your
too.
clients get the best deal, but then also they can compare services and making sure they're getting good coverage.
Yeah, and people have asked me, well, is it best to keep my home insurance and car insurance? At this point, with everything's off the rails when it comes to insurance, I don't think it hurts to shop.
Yeah.
I think it's good to actually give a couple names and have your client contact them, and see what they can provide and what those rates would be.
And Rochelle, a lot of the condo insurance policies are requiring your home and auto combined for them to insure condos now.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that. That's a
Yeah.
good catch.
So some of the last, I think, two that we have on here. So one of the things that has cropped up as a way for us to solve for some of these situations where it's got enormous amounts of claims, it's not going to be insurable. I mean, these are things that will come up from time to time that we come across. But sometimes using the existing, this doesn't necessarily mean it will solve all the problems immediately, but sometimes using the existence insurance provider that the seller already has their binder with can sometimes help because it's carrier to carrier at that point. It's just changing the individual. So it might be a way to potentially solve some of those problems. And then the big thing, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but disclosure is a big deal when you have claims. So this is kind of a reminder to sellers that if they've had some sort of insurance claim, it's best just to disclose it. Even though things have been remediated, it's best to disclose rather than to have something hidden or have something find it later.
We got the client like $10,000, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Makes
So
us
that
look
was,
real good.
yeah, I mean, we were happy because we represented the buyer, but oh geez, if the seller only knew, and we didn't name any names here, right, Shannon? We didn't put anybody on, throw anybody on the bus,
Mhm.
but my gosh, that seller, by hiring that particular broker, not with the best choice, yeah, they lost 10 grand essentially because they
Yeah.
didn't properly advise their client on the disclosures as far as you need to report this, you need to
Yeah.
like, and there was knowledge, and that was the
Oh,
unfortunate.
there's definite knowledge on that situation. But the other consideration too, as a seller, is pricing too. So I shared on the screen a flood map. So that particular house and that situation, it was a listing, and the seller was frustrated because the home wasn't selling. Why isn't it selling? Why isn't it selling? You know, we've done XYZ, open houses, market, the whole thing. And like the agent had done literally everything. And what it came down to is the pricing of the home compared to homes outside of the flood zone. It was just it didn't match to what the buyers, and the flood was spooking them. So kind of keep that in mind. That's a hard thing. I mean, to kind of apples to apples compare, but it is something that is a big deal for those first time home buyers. So keep that in mind.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be first time home buyer, Shannon. I mean, I
Yeah.
sold a property up in North Bend, and it was on the river, beautiful riverfront property. And pricing it, it was funny because it was sat on the market for so long. This is a few years ago. And the reason for that was because the listing agent didn't do their due diligence and just kind of pricing out how, that flood insurance played. And so what I was able to do is kind of back it out, find other properties. It might have closed, 2, 3 years prior, but I was able to kind of work that, okay, that's how they took that adjustment factor for the flood insurance. And that's how we end up getting a great deal on that property. My clients were fine because they had insurance for, potential flood, but beautiful North Bend property that's probably worth over $3 or $4 million at this point in time. So there's ways to price it. It has to make sense.
Yeah,
People are logical and they will make decisions based on risk factors.
for sure. There's a couple questions, so we're going to wrap up here with just a couple of the questions that came through. So if you've got other questions, feel free to unmute your line or throw it in the chat and I'll ask it for you. But
Good
Rick
one,
had a comment, says, I just received my renewal with my carrier. My increase is up over 15%. Oh, yes, you're not alone. I bundle,
Yeah.
have no claims. My agent said the rates are up for all. Welcome to California fire and East Coast hurricane drift to our state. Yeah, this is what's going on. There's insurance
Yeah.
across the board has increased. Um, Jamie, are there currently any instances in Washington of insurance companies completely denying insurance in high-risk areas like they have in areas of California? Not that I've seen. Rochelle, what about you?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Well, there are companies that are not insuring
Yeah.
certain types of properties. I think even Sean had mentioned, Allstate doesn't do certain
Like
ages and prop.
like condos without having an auto insurance included. That's correct.
Yeah, so it's possible. I mean, are you outright just not going to be able to get insurance? You will. It's going to be maybe not that type or with that carrier. So it's important to shop.
Okay.
Okay, and then another question. When my buyers tried to reach out to get homeowners insurance, the home insurance company told them to wait until after the inspection so they knew the age of the roof, electrical panel, etc. Would you just include the verbiage in the 22D and get the insurance company before your 35 hours due?
This is why you want the 22 VV, Allison. So
Yeah.
Yep.
include that so that you have some more protection for the insurance. Because if that's what the insurance provider is telling you is to wait for the inspection, they will want to see, you know, or hear about like how's the wiring, you know, that kind of stuff. How's the roof, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they are actually asking for inspection. So I had one where the insurance agent, and I had no idea, but my buyer called to get her binder and information, and they asked her, did you have an inspection? Yeah, said, send me the inspection report. And all of a sudden I get an email from the lender like, are you sure this isn't lipstick on a pig? I'm like, no. And they had sent an email with items that they were saying, essentially, he said, based off the inspection report, here are major areas of concern that
Mhm.
carriers will most likely end up canceling once they do the inspection. So that is an
Mhm.
email that I received.
That's funny you
That was
say, because I
coming.
was just thinking myself is that with insurance companies really trying to cover the liability, if they ask the buyer if they did an inspection or appraisal and they say yes or no or whatever, and then there's a claim and they find out there was, they'll deny the whole thing because you lied to
Yeah,
them. So that might
exactly.
be something we see in the
Exactly.
industry.
We're gonna see it. We're seeing it.
And that
Yeah.
addendum is going to be adjusted. So based on the laws of the land and the insurance issues that we're facing, our MLS is actually figuring that out and adjusting the form. So the statewide form will be changing in the next couple of months. So hopefully it answers your question, Allison. You just need to, so are they, somebody just texted me, are they on your case, Candace? Did your client give the inspection report? Because I mean, you don't have.
She did. And I didn't, that was one of those things where in our buyer consult, I didn't say, oh, and by the way, when you go search for your binder, don't send them the inspection report. I did not even, I mean, this is like the first in a
Right.
long time, so yeah.
Does the title report, great question, Jamie. Does the title report reveal any previous insurance claims? It does not. It would be in title insurance claims. So if they didn't pay their bills or they didn't pay the contractor or things like that, that could pop up. But we're talking about homeowners insurance claims that would only be reported to the insurance industry for homeowners insurance. And the
The
last question,
latest for knob and tube.
yeah, knob and tube. Is there still knob and tube out there? My gosh, of course there is.
There is. We just cleaned it all up in one of my last closings
Yeah.
a month ago.
Yep. So if the lender knows about the knob and tube, they'll usually ask for it, and the insurance, most likely you're gonna have a hard time getting an insurance provider to insure a older home with knob and tube. You might be looking at self-insuring your house. Or just paying to have the knob and tube replaced so you can get insurance on the place.
What my sellers had to do just so that we could close.
They had to, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it going to become commonplace to look at the insurance claim history? How is that discovered? Yes, it's usually discovered, Jamie, when you contact the insurance carrier and you ask them, hey, I want to get an insurance binder started on this property. Here's the address. They pull it up in their system, and then they do they look at their reporting and they determine whether that's something that they're willing to take on or not. That Kent house with the mold, like, I wouldn't say moldy roof, it was like the mossy roof, right, Shannon? That was denied by how many carriers? 5, I think, 5
Oh
carriers.
my gosh.
Yeah, and just because it had moss, and it was December, and so we actually had to have a guy go out there and clean it, and that was almost impossible to get a guy to clean it in December, so that
5
was
carriers?
not
Dang.
cool. Yep.
Goodness. Yeah, get your resources ready, guys.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. NAR puts out a clue report explained. That's a great homeowners insurance, kind of a clue report. Would be a good thing to go to. It's www.nar.realtor/homeowner-insurance clue report. You want to Google that, you'll probably find out a good article that you could reference. It's kind of explaining what a clue report is. That might be helpful for you, Janie, to add to your knowledge base on the insurance process and looking up claims and a claim history. Thank you, Tammy, for sharing that. Any other best practices that you guys have come across that might help all of us on the call tonight? Candace, thank you for sharing yours. That was good.
I don't know if it was a best practice, but I'm definitely going to have a new one.
Anything else you guys want to share? Got some really experienced brokers on the call. I'm sure you run into this. Has anybody had to call FEMA to deal with flood?
Mm-mm.
Most of the time you have to, they denied and we have to go find another insurance carrier. That's quite common up in Snohomish. We had to do that quite a bit when we had a lot of water that one year. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate your participation. Thank you very much. Excited about next week. We've got a great topic next week. Is that when we've got our guest speaker, Shannon? I think we've got a guest
We
speaker next.
I
do.
believe
Yes,
that's
we
Riley.
do.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
excited about that. We have
Me
our
too.
rookie of the year who's going to be talking about how he managed his business. He actually had a new baby and he works on both sides of the state and he's a firefighter and his story is incredible. So you guys can look forward to that next week. He's going to be interviewed by Candace Frazier and it's going to be an amazing time. I'm excited to jump on and hear him talk about some of the ideas and some of the things he's doing to improve his business. And he is licensed less than two years. So it's like, there are some things that I can even learn from what he's doing to balance life and be a dad and also and he was a top producer. Candace, didn't he make top producer as
He
well?
made top producer, yes, but he lives in Spokane, so he decided to not join us. But he did. He made top producer. So really exciting, exciting. Yes, join us.
All right, well, so that's
Feel the
next Monday.
inspiration. Yep, next
Have a
Monday,
great week.
inspiration.
Good
See
to
you
see
guys
all of
next
you.
week.